Okay, so this is the photograph that you took in Sydney, and obviously kind of middle of the day or late afternoon because the sun is setting, so really powerful sun, so lots of bright highlights and dark shadows. So the first thing I would do after I import it into the library module is go ahead and go over to the develop module. And in the develop module, I'm going to start on the right hand side, and I'll probably make the global adjustments first. And the first one I'm actually going to make is lens correction. Now, I'm not sure which camera you use to take this, but because the data is actually in the file, the EXIF data, it will know. So I'll just enable the profile correction. You can see it kind of gets rid of a little of the distortion, and also remove chromatic aberration, which I'm not sure if there's any in this file, but if we zoom in on like the corner here, sometimes there's a little bit of like a misalignment of pixels in really contrasty areas where you'll see just a little bit of like a red to green or yellow to blue halo, so that just will remove that. All right, and then, so that's typically what I'll do first, and then I'll also make any crops if we need to. Would you like me to crop this? I don't want to crop, since it's your photo, I'm not sure, okay.
I have a copy already.
All right, so I'd probably just use the crop tool here. We could change the aspect ratio if we want to, or we can simply go ahead and just start cropping it. I might just crop up a little bit here. Kind of depends on what's most important in the image. If I position a cursor outside, then of course we can go ahead and rotate that if I want to make the bridge just a little bit straighter, or we could have used the auto option right over here, but I think that'll work just fine. All right, now I'll go to the basic panel, and this way we can start working with our highlights and shadows and the whites and blacks. So I can tell from the histogram that we have information in the shadows as well as highlights. And if I tap the J key, that actually turns on these little histogram warnings, which tells me that in this image, the sun was so bright that it's overexposed those areas. Now I can try to get detail, to recover detail in those areas by moving down the white slider, but I don't think I'm going to be able to recover them all just because it's so overexposed. Now the highlights, I'll bring those down, and now it looks like I've got at least a little bit of gray in those areas. So it's kind of going back and forth between the whites and the highlights to just bring back some detail. And then I'll bring up the shadows to make sure that we can see these people here and the details in the clothing that they're wearing. But when I do that, it made it a little too bright. So I might want to reset my black point, just drag that down a little. And I might also take the exposure down just a little bit. And I think the color balance is fine, but if you wanted to, we could go ahead and adjust the temperature or tint slider. So if I wanted to just warm it up a little bit, make it a little bit more yellow, we can go ahead and do that. And then there's lots of other things we could do. I mean, I could take it to black and white if you wanted to. We could add some color overtones. We could also come in and use our adjustment tools, our selective adjustment tools, or our local tools. So if I wanted to add something like a darkening down on this side over here, I would just double click Effect, and then go ahead and maybe lower down the exposure a little bit, or maybe the highlights a little bit, and then just click and drag this over in order to darken that down. And the nice thing is we can reposition this at any point in time. And if it's too strong, I could just say, nope, let's back up on the highlights or back off on the exposure a little bit. And likewise, I could go in and I could use the radial filter if I wanted to, or I could come over here, and this adjustment brush enables me to go in and, let's say I want to selectively just increase the shadows somewhere. I could go ahead and just increase that. And then wherever I paint with that, I would go ahead and increase the shadows. Let's do that a little bit more. Not sure if you can see that or not, so let's go ahead and move the exposure up just a little bit as well. And all of these have little previews, so we can toggle on and off just that last change we made, or we can toggle on and off all the changes. So that was before, and I'll just turn off that highlight warning there. And tapping the J key, that should be off. And we can do a little before and after. Okay. So you see that you can see into the shadows, into the areas that you couldn't see in before. We might also want to do something a little bit more creative. Maybe come down to the effects down here, and maybe just add kind of a nice vignette that darkens things down. Now in this case, because there's this bright area right here, I might change it to the color priority and use the highlight slider, because you can see if I don't use the highlight slider, it gets a little bit muddy up there. So we can just use that and scoot that over there. And then of course we can go in and we can have a lot of fun with like color. So I could go into the basic panel and we could increase clarity, which would add some contrast. I'm not sure if we need it here since the original was had so much contrast. But we could also go in and increase vibrance. But you see, I'm not sure if you want like the vibrance in both the blues here as well as the yellows. So maybe what I'd do instead is use HSL, because this will allow me to go in and actually change different color ranges independently of one another. So we could go into like saturation if we want to make the yellows a little bit brighter, and you'll notice that it didn't change those blues. And actually it changed the oranges and the yellows. And if we wanted to make them lighter, we could go ahead and click and drag up just to add a little bit of emphasis to them. And maybe we want to do kind of the opposite. I'll stay in luminance with my targeted adjustment tool, and we'll just darken down the sky a little, like that. So again, a little before and after.
Amazing.
Yeah, pretty cool technology, right?
Yeah.
And then if we went into Photoshop, gosh, we could do all sorts of things, right? We could add multiple layers. We could, you can really do whatever you want. You can add text. You can do all sorts of things. Yeah.
But still very important for the skill, how to take photos.
Yeah, and see, and it didn't matter if it was RAW or JPEG, right?
Yeah.
All the tools work the same.
Yeah.
So that's why I would encourage people to photograph in RAW if they can, because they're going to have that added quality.
Mm.
Yeah.